Yes, my name is Johnson Brahim.
My name is Isaac Laiser.
My name is Abeid Kasaizi, and I'm working with the Relief to Development Society.
Yeah, Tanzania has received refugees even before 1961 when we got our independence. We had hosted World War II Polish refugees. But following independence in 1961, we also had refugees from around the region, mainly Rwanda. So the refugees were fleeing from internal conflicts. But at the same time, we also did host what, of course, we might rightly call refugees, but these were from countries that were fighting for liberating their countries. And these were mainly from South Africa, Angola, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. So the two groups, the convention refugees and the freedom fighters, as they were known. Now, unfortunately, these were not recognized by UNHCR. So they were not provided for by UNHCR, but the government used to get assistance from friendly countries in order to support them. Now, as to the convention refugees, we usually put them in settlements where they were given land for farming as well as building their homestead. So the amount of land that was given each family was almost 2.5 hectares. That's per family. And they were provided with seeds, tools for farming in order that they would become self-sufficient instead of being too dependent on foreign assistance. The late Mwalimu was a believer in equality and humanity. And you remember this time, most of the refugees were from these countries that were struggling for independence. And Mwalimu had an idea first of one Africa, and also he did not cherish the idea of borders. So he considered all as human beings needing to be equally treated. So that was one area. But at the same time, you remember Tanganyika then, Tanganyika, Rwanda, and Burundi were under the same umbrella called Deutsche Ost Africa. So upon partitioning of Africa, so the three countries became separate units. So during these various incursions which forced people out of these areas and fleeing into Tanzania, Mwalimu and his government had no other option but to accept them. First, considering the fact that these were humans and that Africa was one, and that previously the three countries were one country, so it was not easy to shut them out. And also, his party, that is TANU, and even the Constitution, had put in the Constitution the element that Tanzania, Africa was one, and that all human beings were one and equal. So they deserved treatment as humans. So as such, Mwalimu, or say Tanzania, was forced to admit all those that ran in the country needing either shelter or some form of peace before going back to their countries after they got independence. And you might recall that at one point, Mwalimu said that he was ready to suspend or to wait for Tanganyika's independence until all other African countries were independent. So that shows how open Mwalimu was, and as such, was so generous to accept these people who were downtrodden or in need of safety and freedom. Well, socially, this was an aided population. So the government was surely forced to overstretch its resources in order to cover for this additional population. And the local society, of course, much as it was welcome, but there was the problem of, running for scarce resources. But at the same time, the government also did provide some services to both groups. And economically, of course, this meant that the government did not have much to spend on, and was, of course, forced to seek assistance from other partners. And politically, of course, the people, much as they welcomed the refugees, there was a tendency of fear that these might stay on indefinitely, and did not consider that they would leave the country. And people were worried about building enclaves of refugees who later might form communities that would occupy various leadership positions, both in the government and in the society. So as such, they were a bit worried, much as they welcomed the refugees. One major issue was that the initial numbers that came in were very minimal. But as days went by and the conflicts, especially internal conflicts, continued in our neighboring countries, we tended to receive more refugees. big in numbers. So as such, the policy towards giving them a lot of land forced the government to think twice. So instead of putting them in settlements, giving them large tracts of land for farming, the government resorted to put them in smaller areas, camps, with the areas just sufficient to build a homestead and do some kitchen gardening. So this was actually the main cause for changing its position on the open, not an open door policy, but on the way the refugees were managed.
The refugee, there was an influx of refugees from Mozambique and also from Malawi, but many of them were from Mozambique, and therefore, from there, this influx of the refugees to start a new settlement in Lundu came then, and TCRS, because already there was signed an agreement between the Lutheran Welfare TCRS and government and UNHCR. Then a person was required to go to Mbamba Bay to start this settlement, and I was sent there so that we could start the settlement. But there were problems there because there was the settlement itself was, the refugees just came in and they had to start life. But assistance was needed from the organizations, especially TCRS. So I have been there, closer there, opened the office there to start a new settlement, Lundo settlement, but there were no roads, and so we had to work on hard to start to construct roads, bridges, and open up the way to the settlement. Challenges of the program. Funds were needed to organize, actually to make implementation of program smooth. Also staff also were needed because it was difficult for the staff to come from various departments to work with us, because that was in the bush, because always the government allocated the bush areas to the refugees far from the local people. Those bushes, there was no water, there were no roads, it was very difficult. Therefore, funds was needed from the Lutheran Welfare Agency TCRS to run the program, and the United Nations had to allocate funds and TCRS to work together to implement the programs in the settlements. To start the settlement, there are problems because it's a new place. It needed roads, health facilities, education, and also communication was very difficult because the people who came in, they couldn't know Swahili properly. So there were translators, and we had to call people to understand what we wanted to do. And these were the challenges. These refugees from Burundi, there was influx of refugees in 1972. The Hutu and Tutsis had a clash whereby the Hutus thought if they could kill the Batusi, as they did in Rwanda, probably because these people speak one language and the culture is one. When they tried that, the Batusi discovered this quickly, and they had to eliminate, try to fight and kill the Burundians. So they came to Tanzania in 1972, about 200,000 of them, and these were splitted. Some stayed in Ulyankulu, and then some were sent to Katumba. The Misham settlement started, but Misham started later. So this settlement continued under tripartite agreement with expatriate from Europe, and later on assisted them as an assistant to the project coordinator. Later on I was a project coordinator, but after coming from a Mateko settlement where Nilsson was working, I was transferred to Liankulu to take over as a project coordinator. And so we continued, and until the settlement was handed over, as this has been always the intention of the tripartite agreement, to receive refugees, resettle them. At the end of implementation, they should be integrated with this international, with the local people there after attaining the standard of self-supporting standard. And that was what we did in Uliankulu, that was what we did in Katumba and other settlements. Yeah, TCRS made a difference in life of refugees because of the assistance of the beginning, the former assistants. TCRS later on continued to assist the refugees with those refugees who remained in the country, to give what they called to give those who are in need, communities, to enable them, to give them funds. TCRS was an organization with the refugees liked and loved very much because they cared them, they helped them to raise their standard of life, and also to make them forget the problems they had in their countries, despite the coming to the new land and new lifestyle, or rather new life, which had many problems and so on. So TCRS, I can say that TCRS should continue if possible. I know TCRS is still there, but they should continue to assist those who are in need, especially to raise the economic life of those who are still in old settlements and new settlements. And if refugees again come to the country, TCRS will start again life to help the refugees, because TCRS was very much likely, not only by the refugees, but all international community.
The contribution of CSOs in supporting the refugee in Tanzania is really enormous, because CSOs are basically found in the grassroots, and they are the first responders of emergence, where at any case, if the refugees are coming, then they will first be in contact with the CSOs groups. And the CSOs has been always useful in supporting the refugees in different undertakings. The programming of assisting the refugees basically require the inclusivity, where the government plays its role to support the organizations that are in the setting of supporting the refugees. So the CSOs, the international organizations, and the government together, they plan together, work together to support the refugees on the ground. The specific examples that I can provide is, for instance, the Rift Development Society. We are planning different initiatives where we support the refugees, for instance, in cash-based interventions, for instance, in training them in different skills that they could use here in Tanzania, or even when they get back to their country of origin. So that way, you find that the CSOs being paramount in the refugee assistance. Let me first start with the strength. The CSO basically has much strength because they know the context of the environment. If you are to engage in a certain area of operation, then the CSOs, since they are there all the time, they are aware of all the procedures, they are aware of the resources available, they are aware of the language, they are aware of how the government works, and that is the big strength. But then on the part of the weakness or the gaps that need to be perhaps looked at is that most of the CSOs, these are small organizations which need capacity support in terms of institutionalization, in terms of systems, in terms of management of funds and management of operations. So CSO have that kind of a gap which need a support basically in terms of capacity development. At the moment, we are running a policy that is almost outdated. Looking at that one may also support what is needed to be done in the future. And we urge all the partners, international organizations, the government, to support the CSO in on those areas which they have already developed the capacity, such that at the end of the day, they don't lose that capacity which has been attained. As I've mentioned, the CSOs are predominantly within the area of operation. And it becomes easier if these CSO have been supported in building their capacity. Then it brings easiness of doing business, whether the international organization comes in or the government itself comes in. If the CSO are stronger, can address the issues in a very, very professional way, then the exercise of supporting the refugees, the asylum seekers, becomes more easier. We have always focusing on the inclusion, and we think that should continue. Leaving no one behind has to be the order of the day, such that as we go forward, we ensure that everybody is involved in building and implementing what is needed for the beneficiaries.